Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in Birmingham within 1 hour. I really appreciate all your support and please continue to keep sharing the stories. It is literally only you guys that make sure this news gets heard. This story is about the most used gun in the UK. It has finally been discovered. This occurred in Scotland and Liverpool. The story surrounds them areas. We do have a similar story in Birmingham actually. Gun number 6, the police called it. It was used in 11 shootings and it has still not been recovered. I did speak on it when I covered a story about Depps' father who featured in the documentary, but it was a while ago, so I may do a whole thing on that gun number 6 because it was a really interesting story. It started its life in the UK in Scotland. The Beretta 9000S handgun was linked to attacks across England and Scotland. It was used in approximately 19 shootings, but it was actually discharged 22 times, they said, across England and Scotland in 7 years. The attacks included 5 attempted murders, 8 home attacks, as well as a shooting at a shopping centre and at a chip shop. This made it the most prolific weapon ever traced by British police. It is not known how the 9mm self-loading pistol first entered the country, although firearms of its shape and size are often smuggled in parcels from abroad. Police were first alerted to this gun on the outskirts of Glasgow in 2010. They were made aware of the gun cartridges that had been left at 2 scenes, and this is how they traced the guns. Is every time it's been discharged, the bullet leaves a very distinctive fingerprint-like mark on it, so the police can just trace that and follow it from shooting to shooting. It was actually in Erskine near Glasgow. They'd hit a signpost and it had damaged it, and similarly, the second report from 10 miles away in Port Glasgow said there appeared to be no obvious targets. So the police guessed and said that it was probably 2 discharged rounds as test fires to make sure the gun was fully functional. And this is actually from the Independent newspaper as well, a bit from the Angus paper in Scotland, and also the police websites. There's 3 different sources that have put this story together. And then they say that the gun gradually made its way down south and predominantly circulated in the West Derby, Anfield and Kirkby area, so Liverpool. Police are still yet to determine whether the gun's original owner moved with it or whether it was handed over to other individuals. Between 2010 and 2014, the gun became increasingly prolific, as in used more often. 14 incidents were recorded during a short time span, and all were thought to be targeted specific individuals. So this is when they started to believe that this gun was being used in some sort of gang capacity. 4 people were injured in warning shots. They fired at cars, at houses, but the victims often refused to cooperate with police. Automatically, police would believe that they was associated to gang culture if you don't write a statement. While the gun continued on its crime spree, the National Ballistic Intelligence Service, which is abbreviated as NABIS, were determined to track the gun down to find the culprits. Using forensics, they were able to match the unique markings left on each cartridge from various crime scenes and link the shootings to one gun, the Link Series 4, that's why they called it that name. In the meantime, the 17th shooting had taken place in a shopping centre in Kirkby, Merseyside. It left the victim seriously injured, and it was followed shortly after by 10 bullets being fired at a property in the nearby area of Wavo. That is pretty much the whole clip, I believe. I don't think there's much more bullets in the clip than that. But then the gun was not used for 3 years. It just went dark. In 2017, it resurfaced when a man called Mark Gaskill was shot at 11 times. So 1 more time than the last shooting with the same gun. He rode through Wavo on his motorbike. So this must have stayed in the area for them 3 years. Despite being shot in the head, he was saved by his motorbike helmet he was wearing. Police believe that the lull in activity had meant that the gun had been changing hands during this period. They then turned their attention to rumours that a cannabis supply network in the area was involved and being led by a serial offender named James Lunt. Lunt headed up the gang known as Wavo 420 that operated in the streets around his home in Liverpool. He used an arsenal of weapons including a Beretta 9000S and a Uzi submachine gun that could fire 600 rounds a minute and a sawn-off shotgun. After an extensive investigation, the 29-year-old was locked up for leading the drug and gun conspiracy that used a handgun in the 19th attack. Despite not pulling the trigger himself, the judge, Rachel Smith, accepted that due to the mobile phone records and Lunt's position as the head of the gang, it was unlikely that the attack took place without his knowledge. The Beretta was finally seized in Merseyside after armed police raided a home in Kirkby that belonged to one of Lunt's associates, Adam Bigley. Bigley, 26, had previously been sentenced for a gun charge and he got 6 years for that as well. And that is the worst thing you can do is ever, if you've got a mark on your name for firearms, to then go and touch firearms firearms again, it's the worst thing you can do. You could potentially get a life sentence for that, and also just the fact the police are you're marked. As soon as you've got any sort of thing on your record like that, the police will treat you with extra suspicion. Surveillance teams have been monitoring Lunt and Bigley in the hours leading up to the raid when they saw the pair doing a meeting in a playground surrounded by children. Lunt was not linked to any of the shootings carried out with the Beretta before the attack on Mr. Gaskill in 2017. Over 11 months of hearings at Liverpool Crown Court, prosecutors Nigel Power and Nicola Daly detailed the drug and gun network to the two juries. Lunt and 7 of his associates were sentenced. Lunt pled guilty to conspiracy to possess firearms with intent to endanger life, possession of a prohibited firearm for transfer, possession of ammunition without a certificate, and to supply cocaine and cannabis. He was jailed for 21 years with an extended licence period of 3 years and will have to serve at least 2/3 of his sentence before being considered for parole. Lunt's associates included Lee Spencer Brown, who was 30 years old. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in jail after being found guilty of conspiracy to supply cannabis. So that's quite a big sentence for supplying cannabis. So it was mainly due to the fact that they believed it was organised crime. A lot of the time people can just say, I'm just smoking this cannabis, or it's a small scale operation, but they could figure out that it was a big scale operation. So that's quite a big sentence for cannabis. Catherine McGuinness, 50 years old, was jailed for 12 years after they found a submachine gun in her home. Michael Connaughty, 33, was jailed for 14 years and will serve half of that sentence before being eligible for release. Thomas Porterfield, 37, was jailed for 13 years after his DNA was found on the submachine gun. Alan Evon, 22, was sentenced to 13 years after being described as a foot soldier in the shooting plot. So this would sort of insinuate there's an army. His DNA was recovered at the shooting of Mr. Gaskill, although he was not the gunman. James Bennett, 25, was jailed for 5.5 years after being convicted of conspiracy to supply cannabis. And then Lee Jones, 25, was jailed for 3 years for supplying cannabis. Commenting on the sentencing, the detective charge of the case said, "Those convicted today were caught up in a web of conspiracy involving the supply of guns and drugs in the streets of Merseyside. Thanks to the work of the National Ballistic Agency to identify the Beretta and the Uzi alongside other guns with DNA on some of the suspects, we were able to focus our investigations and link the two groups. Today they have been sentenced for a total of 88 years, which shows the severity of the crime. 2 of the weapons that were recovered were responsible for 21 shootings in Merseyside, 16 shots fired and 5 resulting in injury. This could easily have been a very different story." This just goes to show the extent of how much one gun can do. This gun was very efficient, like to be able to let off 10, 11 rounds without it jamming or something going wrong, which is a very common occurrence in handguns you find in inner cities. This gun worked perfectly and it could have taken a lot of lives. And in that case, it sort of unravelled and sort of opened up the other gang that had associated around the area and what they was up to as well. So this is how one thing like this, like a gun, can bring down a lot of people, one gun, and this involved 2. So I really want to hear what people have to say on this story. And please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Follow us online at Scarcity Studios. And if you want to donate to the channel, please go to the website at scarcitystudios.co.uk. There's plenty more news on the way and I really appreciate your support. Thank you.